Hey, what's going on, social media world and NBC Church family? Coming to you with the weekly on March 28th, 2022. There's a lot going on in the world. We have mayhem happening at the Oscars. We have the Sweet 16 boiling down to the Final Four. We've got all kinds of international conflicts, and Pastor Bob and I are here to sort it all out for you and let you know.
There will be wars and rumors of wars.
Indeed. Everywhere you look.
We're waiting for the earthquakes to start coming. I did have an earthquake in my office like 10
there was a
ago.
Furious squall this afternoon.
I did on my phone. I got the warning that there's going to be a squall warning, which ended 10 minutes ago. But
the sun is literally out right now. It looked like Empire Strikes Back 10 minutes ago, and now it looks like a beautiful day.
Pastor Dave, it's got to be the end. It's got to be the end.
Signs of the times. So coming at you guys with eschatology and whatever else is on our minds. Hope you're doing well. If you're watching here on social media, say hey, let us know that you're with us. We would love to check in with you. And if you have any questions about the sermon series or the topics that we've been covering here at NBC lately, we'd love to engage with you guys. Always good to connect together with you. We're going through a series called Cultivating the Christian Life and talking about different aspects of spiritual formation. And we've made it to phase 5. As a planted tree sends its roots into the ground and begins to grow and mature, eventually trees, as designed by God, are made to multiply. Trees reproduce themselves. And just like that, as believers, as followers of God, as disciples of Christ, we too were made to multiply. We too are made to expand the table, to expand the borders of the garden, to fulfill his great commission and share the good news and spread the image of God all over the earth until the glory of God covers this place like waters cover the sea. That's our mission. Yeah. That's what we're all about. And Pastor Bob, you kicked off phase 5 with us yesterday. One of my favorite things is listening to you talk about mission. And I think you do that so well and so skillfully. And yesterday was no exception. So tell us a little bit about what's been on your heart lately. I know you think about mission all the time, but I'm sure you get into new topics and new authors and new books and new cultural situations where we nuance our mission conversation. So what's the latest in your thinking, man? How are we fulfilling the mission these days?
Well, I'll still say,
I'll
say that no matter what, people still need Jesus. So that never changes, right?
Constant.
And Jesus will come back. He'll make all things right. The thing that we need to discern is how do we live in the, what is the term, the already but not yet, right? The kingdom is here, but it's not yet here. And different seasons, different epochs of history present different challenges. And
hold on, epochs, bro. We have like,
right, that's what I'm saying. Epoch, eras.
We have an audience that needs a little glossary here with Pastor Bob. What epoch is that? Like a character on Star Wars? The epochs?
Oh, it's a term. The epoch, the section of history. All
right.
Cultural challenges change, and that's the thing that Christians wrestle with: is how do I respond in the cultural moment that's before us, right? And in some epochs of history, the church is more well thought of. In other parts of history, the church is more persecuted, is more on the outcast. And it certainly seems like nowadays it's harder to be a Christian, in the sense that in America we are not, like I said, getting thrown in jail yet, but certainly there is a social cost to saying you're a Christian, or at least I would say if you are holding to the tenets of a true biblical worldview, there are certain cultural narratives that you are going to come up against nowadays that are going to put you on the quote unquote wrong side of history, as people have been saying. And that brings with it, I guess, some baggage in terms of sharing the gospel with people, because those are the first things that people think of. So the story that we opened with yesterday was the good example of, this guy at the hotel, and he's at a Christian conference, and you had a skeptic there who was basically thinking, you're a Christian, you should be living this way, and don't tell me otherwise. And I imagine if you're out there watching today, there's probably some issues that you run into in conversations with your family or at work. And as soon as you bring those things up, it just like it doesn't like you can't advance the conversation past that. All they want to talk about is sexual issues or whatever else it is that's coming up that presents a barrier to getting to kind of the simple gospel message. So our topic yesterday was talking about being salt and light. And by the way, Pastor Dave, I love that the image of the expanding the borders of the garden, right? That was the Westminster guy. What was his name?
Greg Beale.
Greg Beale,
did a
right? Greg Beale.
Good job, like bringing the Great Commission and the garden imagery throughout the whole scriptures.
Yeah. So tying the opening garden image, expanding that border, and tying it to the essentially the Great Commission of expanding the kingdom. So I love that image.
So just check in with social media while you're thinking about Greg Beale here, Bob. So Tracy's here saying hello. Good to see you. Tracy says, favorite food, mushrooms.
No, least favorite food.
Least favorite food.
She doesn't like peanut butter.
Tracy.
Wow. Well, she might be allergic. Hold on. She might be allergic.
Oh man. If I had to live without peanut butter, I don't know if that would be okay with me, Tracy. I'm sorry that you don't like that, but hey, we all have our thing. Bob, I actually have to confess, I do like Brussels sprouts. The way my wife prepares them.
I knew you were more holy than me.
It's all about the salt. she puts the salt on there and cooks them till their sweetness comes out. And
Amanda has done different things. And I just cannot get into them. By the way, Tracy, here I'm gonna do this for you right here.
Tracy said no, she's not allergic. It's just no good.
I keep it in my office. I'm gonna have some right now.
Oh my gosh, Pastor.
There we go. Something to pick your poison.
We're auditioning for a new Food Network program called Taste Your Lunch on the Air.
And I'll put it right here for you.
Skippy, huh? Are we
Skippy.
doing creamy or crunchy here today?
It is meant to satisfy my hunger, so I don't have things that are not healthy for me.
But are you trying to make an argument that peanut butter is healthy? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, in moderation. is. Okay, so what were we talking about?
I think we were talking about the current cultural moment.
That's right. And we somehow got the peanut butter. Here. We got the peanut butter.
It's challenging, man.
Yeah.
It's challenging.
Well, so I opened that way because I wanted to set it up and say the call to be salt and light is preceded in Matthew 5:10 by the fact that we're going to be persecuted. So Jesus gives the whole statement about the Beatitudes, and that's the last thing he brings up is that, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is going to be the kingdom of heaven. So that's and then the two verses after that he expounds on that a little bit more. But then right after that is where he launches into that famous section about being salt and light. And in our current moment, you have people like this guy that David Kinnaman met, and then we talked about the stats about people that are having a biblical worldview. In fact, I was seeing another stat today, I think among millennials that 60% would say they're Christians and they would go to church, but only 2% have a true biblical worldview, meaning they're believing things like, Jesus rose from the dead and the Bible is the inerrant word of God and things of that nature. If you don't hold to those things, some of these people that are doing the polling would say you're not holding to a true. You can say you're a Christian, but you're not holding to a true biblical worldview. And I would argue that your view of the Bible is ultimately what's going to affect whether you have a worldview that's truly Christian or not, other than just being a Christian in name only to some extent.
It seems really low. I mean, I think, sometimes we hear these broader surveys that say like the country's half Christian or 2/3 Christian, but when you really nail it down to biblical worldview and the tenets that people hold on to, it's more of a cultural term being Christian than it is following beliefs that are derived from the Bible. It's like, how the housing market was really inflated back in 2008, like homes had this value on paper.
Right.
They it looked like they were worth a lot more than they really were. And what we experienced back in '08 was like a more of a market correction, and homes went down to their actual value. And so sometimes we hear things like Christians are making up half the country, or more than that. But the real biblical worldview, the data shows that that's a lot lower than perhaps we think we are.
Yeah. So I cited this book, Faithfully Different, which I've been reading recently, and I'm pretty impressed with her research. So this was the statement she made. This was from Arizona Christian University's Worldview Inventory, and what they found. This is a statement she made in 2020. They found that only 6% of all American adults have a biblical worldview, and then among 18 to 29-year-olds, the number drops to 2%. And then she said, perhaps even more shockingly, researchers found that just 21% of those attending evangelical Protestant churches have a biblical worldview. So she's saying the things that are different now are that you're having people even within this is the statement, only 1 in 5 people attending evangelical churches have a real biblical worldview, is the statement she made. And I was just like, is that true? Right. So here's how Barna defines, when they do their surveys, what a biblical worldview is. You would believe in absolute moral truth. You believe the Bible is totally accurate in all the principles it teaches. Satan is a real being or force, not merely symbolic. A person cannot earn their way into heaven by trying to be good or doing good works. Jesus lived a sinless life on earth, and God is the all-knowing, all-powerful creator of the world who still rules the universe. Now, there could be some other things that we add in there, but at the very minimum, those are things that they're looking at. And you could have, and what they're saying is that somebody holds a biblical worldview if they believe all of those things. And often there's probably a mixing and matching. So you might believe some of those things, but not every single one of those statements. And that's where the true worldview starts to drop a bit. So it was really interesting to me to kind of go through that. And then she talks this is all in the first chapter, about just things that are different than they were in the past. And she goes on to, the whole book goes on to talk about how do we remain faithfully different in a world that is just doesn't think like us. So if you're out there and you think, I'm living in my work or my family, and they think differently than me, what she's saying is they actually do. They actually do think very differently. It's almost like you're on different planets sometimes. And the question that we started that way, because then we asked the question for the message, well, in that worldview, how can you become salt and light in a world that doesn't view Christians favorably? That's kind of the tension question.
There's the tension.
Yeah.
Just in case this is whetting your appetite and you guys want to dive a little farther into this, recently Bob and I both had listened to her do a podcast with another female Christian author named Elisa Childers. I will link that podcast in the show comments today. I think it's worth your time. They really do tackle this topic and so much more. If you guys want to listen to her, fantastic book, fantastic stuff. And so, Alicia Childers, salt and light.
Sorry, Alicia Childers also wrote a book called Another Gospel. Alicia Childers, Another Gospel, which is also a very good book that I read a while ago too. So, and
she was part of a local Christian rock band, right? Or a nationally known.
She was part of Zoe Girl. Right. Zoe Girl back in the day.
And she kind of went down more of a progressive Christianity path for a while, and then sort of steered back towards more of an evangelical perspective. Wasn't her dad also involved in the music industry? Her father was like also maybe a Christian musician or something.
Yeah, maybe. I'll have to go back and look at the book. I'm sure.
Anyway, check out that podcast. I'll put it in the comments. So how do we be salt and light? I think you had three.
So we kind of gave the lengthy introduction, but the whole sermon was about what does it mean to be salt and light. So that's what we gave us. Food.
Three main tips you gave us yesterday, right? So what were those movements again, and how did you unpack them for us?
Matthew 5:13-16, and yes, three. I basically kind of restated essentially what Jesus says in a pithy way, but this is the progression I think that he talks about in just these 3 verses. He says, if you want to be salt and light, you need to, the question is, how do you make an impact in the world? First, you need to have an attractive taste, like people should want to be around you and see there's something different. And when you have that attractive taste, you create an alternate society. People see they see you shining, pointing them to the greater light. And the purpose of doing all that is to point people to an active glory. And I didn't get, because we had that missionary interview in there, I didn't get a chance to unpack that kind of word play that I did there. So maybe we can do that before the end of the podcast today. But yeah, the first one, the attractive taste, we talked about how Jesus said that we are called to be the salt of the earth. You are the salt of the earth. And we talked a lot about salt, and that's where we got into the Brussels sprouts and the steak and the pretzels. And the point that we're making is that in the ancient world, salt served as a preservative, and it also served to make food better. And the pretzel illustration was meant to show that when you have a good pretzel, if it's seasoned with salt, you don't sit there and say, man, that was great salt. You sit there and say, the pretzel was great because the salt made it better. And that's the point of what Christians should be doing in society, doing good works, impacting the world for the common good, so that people would be pointed to Christ. Mm-hmm. So I know you had a question about what is that. I use those Charles Colson categories to unpack that a little bit. So maybe we can chat about that for a minute.
I don't know if you're able to share that slide with his well-known book, How Now Shall We Live?
Right.
But I mean, I think we're salt sort of on a macro level in terms of influencing society and advocating for those who are less fortunate and things like that. But I think we're also salt on a micro level, right? In individual relationships, we're also helping people who we're personally connected to too. But let's talk about the macro with this Colson thing. So what are some tangible ways we can be salt right now? 2022. What does this look like?
Yeah. So in the book, he kind of walks through, the gospel story of the creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. And in the creation pieces, he talks about the necessity of understanding where we came from and I'm trying to say this in a gracious term, the inconsistencies that come with a naturalistic worldview of not believing in God, and where that ultimately leads to kind of a social Darwinism type thing. And then the fall, he talks about the effects of sin in the world. And then redemption, which is what people are longing for. They felt the effect of the fall and they want to be redeemed. And then the restoration, kind of the last piece, he gives all these categories about where you can bring redemption into the world. How do I bring redemption into the lives of those around me? And so he talks about just generally morals, which I think affects our view of crime and like drug use and how we treat other people. I think the creation part of the gospel story points us to the fact that all people are made in the image of God, and that really should impact how we live and how we interact with folks. If everybody's made in the image of God, they are all worthy of respect and dignity, and we're made for relationships, and we desire a relationship with our Creator, but some people are blind. So living out morals that are good for the common, the common society happens both at a micro level, like Dave's talking about, but also at a macro level. And one of the challenges we have in the culture today is that we're having different views on what is moral. Some of the things people are talking about today that we may have considered immoral in the past are now being celebrated, and kind of vice versa. These four categories we talk about here. Another category that he talked about in the book was this idea of entertainment, education, business. He also talked about being a good citizen. So what does it look like to be a good citizen in modern day America, and doing your civic duty and caring for your neighbor, people that are around you, being involved in issues that are important, issues of life, all of life issues. Education's a big thing. That's been the big thing that we've been talking about recently in the news, is how do you what is education for, and what are people getting taught, and how do we teach them the true nature of, I guess, the true story of the universe, if you're coming from a Christian worldview. Being involved in all these areas is important, and it's an opportunity for you to do what I call gospel demonstration, in a sense where you're not getting up and preaching the gospel the extent that you're saying, hey, you're a sinner and you need to repent and come to Jesus, but you're showing the outgrowth of that reality in your life in how you care for other people around you, truly loving your neighbor. So I don't know, Dave, did you have any other thoughts on that? Did those things strike you in one way, shape, or form?
I mean, very much so. I think we do have an opportunity here, and I think that we're so unaware of how important salt really is, that we're called to preserve society, and though things don't perhaps look like they're going real well right now in our society, we have to remember that Christianity has actually flourished and functioned
Right.
the best and the brightest during those darker moments in history. I mean, let's remind ourselves how Christianity started and where it started 2,000 years ago. And they made a huge impact on their culture
Mm-hmm.
to the point where there was a lot of first century subcultures that are no longer surviving today. But it was Christianity which
Yeah.
ultimately took over the West. And I think we're
Well, it was the church that led in terms of the sciences and the arts and in so many of those other fields, throughout history. And
yeah,
now, to some extent, the church and the Christian faith has been exiled from those areas. We can't even talk about that. Science is not like Christianity and science work well together, but there's what people have called a scientism that's out there that almost has created its own religious aura to it. That science can explain everything. Although John Lennox, actually a professor at Oxford, actually wrote a book that questioned, can science explain everything? And the reality is that science helps you understand the universe, but it can't tell you about meaning and certain things like that. So
yeah,
anyway, so the encouragement within the Colson book is to think in your sphere of influence, how do I live faithfully different? How am I salt in all these different areas? How can I bring redemption into my work as a parent, as an educator, as a business leader, as a pastor, as a nurse? How can I be salt in there and show people that there's something different about me and make the world better for the common good?
yeah. That might seem overwhelming. I mean, there's so much work to do, and it seems like,
Yeah.
what difference can I make? But guys, drill down on some very tangible opportunities that you have right now, like in the workplace, wherever you work. The Bible teaches that hard work brings glory to God.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you work for a boss that's difficult, or we can, like Brother Lawrence says, we can wash dishes to
That's
the
right.
glory of God. We can do
That's
the
right.
best we can, and that's being salt and light. Or just think about your money, being generous, even if it's a small opportunity for generosity.
Mm-hmm.
You have a chance to take your treasure and use that for the glory of God.
Yeah.
That's being salt and light. So don't miss those opportunities all
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah, that's so good. You invest in communities in some way, shape, or form. So that was the first point, being salt. And then Jesus goes on to say that we're also called to be, we also are the light of the world. Did you want to talk about the secular message thing? I forgot about that. Yeah.
Sure.
So we talked, let me just summarize that really quick, because I thought that would be a good point of discussion here.
It's definitely worthy of some airtime.
Yeah. So we talked, so this was after the Colson piece, we talked about, we talked about how Jesus said, it is possible to lose your taste and then you become no longer good. And this is why it's important. A pithy saying is to be in the world, but not of the world. But the mistake that Christians make is often, sometimes you can become too salty because you're trying to be too attractive to the world. And then you become influenced by the world. And that, the illustration that Jesus used was water could wash through the salt rock and take away its taste. So when you become too influenced by the world, you lose your ability to make an impact. And so what does that look like? Well, I use the, again, example from this book where she talks, and this is kind of overarching points that she makes. She gives specific examples as she goes through the chapters, but that the current message of secularism, meaning that secularism is a worldview where there's no God. that I think a lot of people are influenced by, and even Christians are drawn into this. And you can see why. And this is why we have to be careful of the cultural messages we're listening to. So she mentioned four things. The message of secularism, which I think is all over the place in shows, in music, and even in common conversations that you might have with people. There's an assumption that feelings are the ultimate guide, that what you feel inside of yourself, what does your heart say, right? Follow your heart. Only right? You do you, right? Is the thing from Oprah, I think. You have to discover yourself. And then happiness is the ultimate goal, which I think is really interesting. Like, what so many people think that the ultimate goal in life is just to be happy. And so we make decisions based on the belief that happiness is the ultimate goal. But as a Christian, what does it look like then to suffer? So if you're suffering, are you not happy? What do you do with your unhappiness if you're a Christian, if that's the ultimate goal?
All right, I take it a step further before you go on to number 3. This is the problem with the felt needs approach to ministry. People have felt needs, and we tend to think we're supposed to cater to them and, help them become happier in whatever problem that they're facing. But people have much deeper needs than they're even aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And so what might make me happy tomorrow will actually could make me very unhappy 10 years from now. The same choice, right? People can get happy committing crimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to take a longer view on ultimate happiness. I think about John Piper's famous axiom about pursuing my happiness in God. He calls it Christian hedonism, right? So that I'm supposed to find my ultimate source of happiness in pursuing the glory of God, and that will satisfy me the most.
Yeah. Well, I'll give well, before you do that, I'll give you another example. I mean, if you have kids, Dave, right? I have kids. I'll tell you what, there's many things I have to do that don't always make me happy, but I have to sacrifice for my children or for people that I love. Right. So if happiness is the ultimate goal, yes, I mean, those things bring me joy, but happiness being the ultimate goal ultimately leads back to yourself. And I'm still struck by, I think it was Andy Stanley that said, people today are not on a truth quest, they're on a happiness quest. We're being driven by that. And it prevents us from engaging in things like suffering well and sacrificing and laying aside some of the desires that we have for the greater glory of God. But you can see why these things are so attractive. And then the third, judging is the ultimate sin, which seems to be self-explanatory, but I offered a couple nuanced points about that. People seem to always just there's a lot, and I don't like this either. I don't like people to tell me what to do. I don't like people looking down on me, and we shouldn't be looking down on people. We shouldn't be thinking that we're better than others. But I think what's behind it is ultimately these first 2 points, that if feelings are the ultimate guide, happiness is the ultimate goal. It's ultimately about me having authority in my life and not letting anybody else have authority in my life, especially not God. So how can God judge me? How could God tell me how to live? That's viewed as being a very bad thing in society today.
Well, here's the irony of that piece, right? There is no such thing as a non-judgmental worldview. Like, so even if you take a completely pluralistic, secular type of worldview, you're going to be very judgy towards exclusivists, towards evangelicals, towards people who claim truth. And it's impossible to avoid this. And so the view actually starts to blow itself up at this point.
Yeah. So the point is, though, I'm using this as an illustration to say this is how Christians can lose their salt, because this worldview starts to wash through our minds, and ultimately wrong beliefs lead to wrong living. So if you're having a wrong belief about God and some of the things he's calling you to, it ultimately affects the way that you live. So I challenge you this week, as you're watching, whatever shows you're watching or news sources or music or whatever, to think about, do you find these points to be very prevalent in the messages you're taking in? And then ask yourself, how is that changing the way that I live and my outlook on life? And then and then thirdly, I guess, see how that's affecting your ability to be salty. So that's point two, and that's some examples of that. The second point was about being an alternate society, which is getting into the light of the world. And this is a little different than the salt. Seasoned with salt, it helps you do things that are better for the common good. But being an alternate society means that you're a light. People see that there's something different about you, and that you're pointing people to the greater light of Christ. And that was the example I gave about taking the dog out and the flashlight and pointing people back to the light of the house. That's our goal. We shouldn't be hiding our lamp under a basket. Now, if I could, I should say, we should be living visibly different, was the point that I made, and I think that Jesus is making here. But I thought what was really interesting, and this is maybe where we could camp for just a minute, Pastor Dave, is the idea of hiding your lamp under a basket. And I don't know, maybe I thought about this before, but I really just thought about it this week. Why would I want to hide the light? So if I was out in the woods looking for the dog, and I was using the light to show me the way, why would I hide that light? And all I could think about was the only reason I'd hide that is so that somebody else was looking for me, and I didn't want them to find me. And I sort of wonder if that's what's behind some of it. Like, we're out in the world, but yet often we try to blend in because we don't want people to see that there's something different about us. And then I guess, what does that say about us? Because there are consequences to following Jesus nowadays, to even doing the salt and light thing, which we certainly unpacked quite a bit at the beginning of the message and of our talk today.
Yeah, I think that's a convicting point. Maybe you and I have an easier time with this. So we are vocational ministers. We serve as pastors. My business card says I'm a pastor. I have no worries about my job being in jeopardy because I'm a Christian. But our society is not made up of everyone in vocational ministry. So maybe this is a little bit more challenging for our listeners today. And we don't live where we're having indifference toward the gospel. There's antagonism toward the gospel. People are cold towards Christianity, and the colder it gets out there, it's like harder and harder to tell people, I follow Jesus, I'm a Christian. You don't gain anything through social capital.
Right.
What is that?
Or again,
thing
there's
in
a
China,
baggage that's associated
system?
with it,
And there's all kinds of baggage associated with it. It's like automatically that means I'm bigoted, I'm judgmental, I'm harsh, I'm legalistic. We did an exercise last night in my small group just with all the misunderstandings about what it means to be a Christian, like what is our perception out there, and we came up with like 40 different very negative descripting words: hypocrites, judgmental, all kinds of stuff like that. We have a branding problem. And so, I think Jesus addresses that head on, saying, that's a cop out to put your light underneath of a basket. Let your light shine. So that's a challenge for all of us.
Yeah.
But what would it look like to let your light shine this week, guys?
Yes. To be the salt and to be light, even in the midst of challenging circumstances. So,
and to give active glory. What did you mean by the word active there?
Yeah. So let's spend just a minute on that. And I think this will probably be kind of maybe the difference. So this is rooted in Matthew 5:16. So when he says, he talks about, don't let your light go under a basket, but in the same way, let your light shine before others so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven. And I think initially you might wrestle with that and say, well, does that mean that I'm drawing attention to myself because I'm doing good works? I want people to notice what I'm doing. And I'm not sure that that's really what Jesus is saying here. I think he's saying that ultimately, if you are a Christian, you are called to live differently in the world, to do good works for the benefit of others. And when you do that, it's not about you, but it's about God. It's about God getting the glory because he's given you the ability to do it. He's given you the strength to do it. And so there's the doing the good works is the active part, and that points to the glory of God. And then when people see the glory of God, they actively worship him. It leads to praise of God. So there's an active part that you're doing to give God glory, and then in reverse, people will actively give him glory as well in their praise. That was the play on words I was trying to say here. And this Elliot Clark quote, which I thought was pretty helpful, I think kind of summarizes it well. He says, Christians aren't just different for the sake of being different. The goal of our evident love and godliness is that others will recognize our good deeds. Our lives are different for a reason. The purpose is to be a window display to God's nature, with the dual purpose of having people come to know Christ and God's greater glory. So when you're different, when your light is shining, there's a reason for that. Like you're called to that. You're called to actively give him glory with what you do, and then people get pointed back to him. And then of course we had the interview with the Kurt and Jana Hanover, heard some great stories from them. Dave, you mentioned your small group. Hopefully this week you get to do this spiritual formation exercise. And then I talked a little bit about my own journey with the Colson Fellows, which has been a really good experience for me. If you're interested in learning more about that, I'd love to talk with you about that, because the program starts in July if you're interested in the upcoming year. But anyway, so that's that was kind of the message.
Awesome. Thanks for helping us think outside of ourselves, prying our eyes off of ourselves this week.
Yeah.
Thinking about those opportunities around us.
Right. Gospel demonstration. And then you're going to talk this week about gospel proclamation, preaching the gospel, saying, hey, you need to know Jesus, right? How do you do that?
Breaking the sound barrier.
How do you do that? That's a good title for the message, breaking the sound barrier.
Hey, I think I just got my title.
There you go.
Awesome. So that'll be Rule 12. We're almost to the end of the series. Thanks for engaging with us, guys. What else is coming up in the life of our church? I know there's some cool things that we wanted to highlight here. What's going on?
Well, you want to talk about the Easter party? I'll mention about the underground one last time.
Yeah, sure. If you could just let me share my screen, I will share about the upcoming world-renowned. I think this is the second annual hair-raising egg party. We're looking forward to pony rides, petting zoo, and more VIP access for children with special needs. 1 to 3 o'clock, guys. It's going to be great. Make sure you register, and we would love to have you. Bring a family member, bring a friend.
Boom.
Bring those children in your life to and you will get your hair raised. I guarantee you that. So
my hair is getting raised already for that.
What else?
All right. Then secondly, we've been announcing it for over a month, and this week is the week for our underground session with
This is it.
This is it with Katie Faust, talking about children's rights and adults speaking about doing hard things, adults doing hard things, and the variety of topics that are underneath of that. So if you go to our website, millingtonbaptist.org/underground-sessions, you can see the promo video that talks a little bit about what we're covering, the write-up, and then register. So make sure you register. Let us know you're coming. The speaker will be here in person, and Katie is really a great speaker, really passionate about the topic. I think it's something, as I mentioned before, that people don't think about a whole lot, and I think you'll certainly leave being very thought-provoked this week about this topic. So we'd love to have you. There's going to be great music. We're going to have food. There's going to be some resource tables, table discussions. It's going to be a good time. So we hope to see you out there this coming Saturday, 6:30 to 8:30, and we're back in the Youth and Family Ministry building.
Join us underground for chicken fingers and children's rights.
Yep. The chicken fingers and children's rights. Not animal rights this time, just children's rights.
Yes. Anything else before we sign off for today, Pastor Bob?
There's always so much to talk about, but I think we'll leave it there for today.
All right, guys. Dig into your workbook. It's a challenging series. We're coming to the end. God bless you. Let us know if you need anything. Have a great week.